Well, I kind of did something that nobody asked me to do. Ray tracing on a B570. About what you would expect, but yeah, let's go over it anyway. So the B570 right now is running about 230 bucks. You can get it probably from like 225 up to about 240 or 250. It's very difficult to get the B580. It's nearly impossible to get NVIDIA or AMD's offerings for video cards, although some other ones in this range are supposed to be coming out within the next couple of months. But I thought this ended up being a really decent card for AV1 encoding and just overall a decent card. And I thought, but what about ray tracing? Now, this thing makes no claims to be good at ray tracing, path tracing, any kind of tracing. It probably couldn't even trace it in a coloring book and stay in the lines. I don't know. It does a very good job of encoding. It does a really decent job of playing games, but it's not a gaming, I don't want to say a gaming video card per se. This thing does its job fairly well for what it is. So I thought I'd go ahead and start with the highest settings first. Very high textures, very high ray tracing, the whole 9 yards, 1440p. And those results were about what you might expect. Black Myth Wukong gave me about 27 frames per second. Now, this looked kind of choppy. Parts of it looked pretty decent. But of course, the benchmark goes over water, and parts of that looked all right, but there was some artifacting, there were some weird looks, and it just didn't it didn't look well. And of course, yeah, the finished product or the end or the benchmark itself turns out 27 frames per second and just not looking very good. You could tell this card struggled to do this. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll try it on very high settings with medium ray tracing. We did better there. That wasn't too bad. That was, it ended up looking a little bit better, and it was about 48, 49 frames per second. So again, if you lower the demand on the video card, it will do a little bit better. And this might be somewhere around that sweet spot. But I went ahead and I did a little bit better. I went high settings, medium ray tracing, and we're closing in on 60 frames per second. This is playable. I think this is pretty decent, and it looks pretty decent. I didn't have near the issues that I did, especially at the lower or the higher resolutions with the lower frame rates. This looked a little bit more natural and actually looked pretty decent. Although I thought the whole thing looked good without any ray tracing at all. At 1080p, we got pretty close to the same number as we did when we were doing 1440p. This did not seem to be much of a difference whether it was rendering at 1080p or 1440. Some games are getting closer and closer with that, and with Cyberpunk, I didn't even bother measuring at 1080p. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. We'll talk about Cyberpunk in a few, because there's something a little different there. This, of course, is an Intel card, which means that its super sampling is XeSS instead of FSR. Now, it defaulted to FSR, and that's what I used, and it also defaulted to frame gen on. When you use Intel's own product, they do not have frame gen. And that became pretty obvious because we're right back down into the low 30s again. I believe this is like 32, 33 frames per second. It looked okay. It was a little bit choppier. It didn't look as bad as the very first sample I tried with all very high settings, but it didn't look that great either. And this was at high with medium ray tracing. It just didn't handle it very well. But you're thinking here, it's like, if it's going to do ray tracing and it's going to have its sampling, XeSS on, it's not going to do frame gen. You're probably seeing a little bit of a difference in what the fake frames are and what your results when you're actually going to be trying to play the game, how it's going to feel, the lag and when you're trying to move and all that. Now, because this is a little bit slower paced game, it's not a shooter, maybe that doesn't matter. But in a case like this, it was quite a bit less. Wukong being a newer title and very demanding and probably not very well optimized, I went ahead to a game that should be well optimized by now, and turns out it is very well optimized. We're getting we're getting in the neighborhood of about 90 frames per second. I believe it was 87, 86, 87, something like that. And I don't have charts, and I'm sorry, but that's all right. I figured, visual aids will put a couple things up here to let you guys see the screenshots. But this actually ended up being fairly well optimized. And it's been out for a little bit, and I get it, but that's one of the things you can tell that some of the drivers have done really, really well. Path tracing, on the other hand, yeah, that knocked us way back down, and it looked really bad, and it performed really bad. It was 22 frames per second, and right at 22. So that is an absolute fail, at least with this card at this point. Now, does the B580 do any better? I don't know. We'll get a hold of one eventually and do the same kind of test. I also want to see if when I get, or if Intel comes out with a B700 series card, if it does perform on a little bit better ground than the 500 series. Now, keep in mind that when I first tested this, the first Intel card I got was an A750. They also had a 300 series, 500 series cards that were in the Alchemist. So with this being Battle Mage, the first thing they're putting out is 500 series. We might see something better, and we might see something a little bit more budget. We'll just have to see what the performance is on both of those. I'm not even going to bother trying to do ray tracing or anything like that on a 300 series if we ever get it, but I will on a 700 if they come out. So then I kind of wanted to see how this compared to other cards, ray tracing and other cards, and I went ahead and ran Port Royal. Funny enough, running this at 1080p and 1440p didn't really make a big difference. In fact, at one point I was getting the same exact score on both, and I had to double check to make sure that it actually picked up that it was in 1080p. It looked okay. It wasn't great. Now, when you run the demo with the sound and everything, it doesn't look that good. Yeah, it's choppy and it stutters and all that stuff. It's kind of a mess. But the benchmark itself ran all right. It ran about 30 frames per second, and the end results kind of show that, and it gives us a score, 6,700 range, which is not, according to the benchmarks when you compare them online, not horrible. It's not great, but it's not horrible. It's more in the neighborhood of, say, a gaming laptop. And a lot of those gaming laptops we're seeing come with like 3050s and stuff like that in them. So this isn't a great effort, but it's an okay effort. The thing to remember too, this is a budget card. This card only costs, in the low 200s, and this card's strength, in my opinion, is it's AV1 encoder. So if you're doing stuff like video editing and all that, you're going to have a much better time with this card than if you're trying to game with ray tracing on. To me, if you're looking at gaming with a card that is half the price of a decent card that's supposed to have decent ray tracing, you're bound to get about half the performance, and that kind of bears out here with the benchmark tests the way they are. So what do I think about this card? Is it just make this card horrible and not want to do anything with it, or what? No, because this card is going to do exactly what I intended to do. It still is blazing fast when it's trying to encode, especially in AV1 for videos like this going on YouTube. And it's very, very cool, very, very quiet, and it does very well. It performs at or above par to the A750, which was the card that I had in that rig before, and it still performs very, very well. And I'm even more happy with getting it than if I had just blown it off and not done it. I wouldn't know. But I mean, not that the A750 hasn't done all right. With the driver support that Intel's given us, it's actually done pretty well. But this time out of the box, drivers were much, much better, and this is a better performing card. Does this mean a hill of beans to anybody? I don't know. I'm putting it out there because I tried it, and I figured I would go ahead and find out. So now, armed with that knowledge, you know too. I don't know if you wanted that knowledge, but I mean, now you know. In any case, if you found anything interesting in this video, or you just took up a couple 10 minutes of your time that you weren't bored doing something else, or if you actually enjoyed the video, go ahead and throw a like on it if you don't mind. If you're not already subscribed, please do. It's greatly appreciated. We're up over 1,500 now. I really, really appreciate everybody that has subscribed and everybody that's thinking about it. Do it. Push the button. We'd love to have you. And don't forget, if you don't do any of that, check out the socials. I'm streaming on that purple channel and doing some other stuff, and really appreciate you, come and hang out in the Discord if you want to. But if you don't do any of that, if you don't like, subscribe, or check out the socials or anything, just one favor, and that's be good to each other. Be kind. It costs nothing to be kind. Smile, wave, hold the door open, say good morning. I ask this all the time, and I hope that one person that sees this occasionally will do that one thing, and it will make their whole day, or the person that they say it to, make their day. You never know. Doesn't cost you anything, but it could make a big difference. So with that being said, I still obviously have stuff behind me that's being built, worked on, all that stuff. I ordered a new case I'm excited about. That's coming up. And yeah, we finally get back to this HP sitting right over there. Yeah, not the server, but the one that, or not the one I'm using as a server, but that old HP pre-built that we have busted into a couple times. We're going to slap an RTX 3050 in there and see if that is finally the card that makes that a decent gaming computer. It's not even designed to be a gaming computer, but you never know. We've had more than one run-in with that. But until that happens, until I get myself into something I got no business getting into, that is all I have. So I'll see you later.